found out recently, because it's obviously not my sphere quite just yet, but there are grandfluencers who are showing off their geriatric drip to the other old ducks, which is quite fun.
That's lovely. I wonder if I can get my mom to become a grandfluencer.
The unfair advantage.
Hello, and welcome back to, for me anyway, another long-awaited Unfair Advantage episode. We've been rather busy over the past few months, so the old Unfair Advantage took a little break, but we are back. I'm Don Packett, and with me as always is the social oracle himself, Mr. Kelvin Jonck. How are you, sir?
Good. Let's call it season 3. We'll call it a season break. And
Season break.
yeah, so we're moving on to, let's call it season 3. But yeah, nice, cold, fighting some bugs, but happy to be back talking about the stuff that we love.
Love it. So we are doing episode 18 today. So it's almost rather fitting that we took a little bit of a break as there was big things happening in the podcast. At 18, I suppose, Ken, we can drive without an adult present. We can drink. So cheers to you, sir.
Cheers.
Delicious. And although we can vote too, yes. Which is not a bad thing. 18 is also, out of interest, Kelvin, if you didn't know this, in the social media world, the age when a kidfluencer, yes, that's a real thing, stops being legally subject to child labor protections, and they can technically gain full autonomy of their contracts, their brand, the works, and the floodgates open. So yeah, we listen, like influence is not a new thing, but the world's gone mad. Personally, I think with influencers, there's finfluencers, skinfluencers, linked influencers, which are more for me like a Temu Tony Robbins, to be honest. But and I found out recently, because it's obviously not my sphere quite just yet, but there are grandfluencers who are showing off their geriatric drip to the other old ducks, which is quite fun.
That's lovely. I wonder if I can get my mom to become a grandfluencer. But yeah, I mean, one of the things we obviously work in this space, a lot of them end up kind of looking the same, and you know, and if they aren't doing their job right, it feels like they're sometimes just shouting into the void of their communities and their followings, hoping that the audience gets bigger, but also then ensuring that those companies, you know, give them more money. So yeah, there's a serious business case in influence marketing, but I think we've got a new kid in town. Yeah.
Yes, so this is what we're going to talk about today. So I've recently found this the omni influencer is the term that we're throwing around. This influencer that can have a squillion different influential conversations at the same time, instead of just posting about the new bikini or new shoes that they've just been bought. And really, I mean, the only reason I sound like a bit of a smarty pants with these big words is that, Kelvin, you have been referring to the LLM models over the last few months in particular as influencers. So what's that all about?
Yeah, so I mean, the more we work in that space and start looking at the differences in the Gen AI chats and their various models themselves, kind of immediately seeing that they have their own unique personalities, right? And then add to that the fact that people are coming to them for advice, for thoughts, for their, you know, purchase decisions. These are incredibly smart. Think of these as incredibly smart influencers with huge audiences who can have many multiple influential conversations at the same time, who are not being paid to promote a specific thing, with the angle of just providing the best unsolicited advice that they possibly can. You can see how influential they could potentially be, and if you put that kind of lens on and start thinking of them in the same way, then you can start putting a personality around that. So they're authoritative. You know, they're continually being consulted by these consumers during the journey. And if regular influencers have a push model, you can think that these influential LLMs have more of a pull model, because customers are coming to them. They're going to them for advice. So your consumers, the consumers, are being influenced by these LLMs, and we need to understand how and why, and is there a way that we can, I don't know, I don't want to say influence their influence or influence their suggestions, but we need to understand how each of them is different. They're not a monolith. So, Gemini, the influencer, and Claude, the influencer, are two different entities who approach the same subject in a different way.
Yeah, and I suppose personally, I know I speak to them differently depending on what I want. So it's always contextual. So if they have these unique personalities, then what drives them, and how can we differentiate and identify what makes each one click?
Yeah, so the personalities themselves seem to be formed by what kind of content and data influences their answers. Obviously, I'm using the word influence a lot. So you can see everything influences everything. So the way I think about it is ChatGPT is kind of like the scholar, right? ChatGPT is this deep thinker. It wants structure. It wants nuance. It wants context. Generic summaries, aren't going to cut it for ChatGPT. They want you to go deep or don't bother at all, right? And then you've got somebody like Perplexity, who is this researcher, this scientifically minded fact checker. So to Perplexity, citations are very valuable. Some kind of credibility signals are the currency that make it work. So you want to go and have your brand or your content cited in really special high domain places, like authority places like Wikipedia, news sites, authoritative sites, and then things like schema markup becomes important. And then you've got Claude, which is interestingly, think of it as this kind of local skeptic. It's been primed to have the least chance of hallucination, apparently. Don't look at my previous video where I find them actually.
No mistakes, Claude.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I found it. I found those mistakes, but it's being marketed and created as a little bit more skeptical, not going to believe the marketing fluff necessarily. None of them are, but Claude, to a higher extent, kind of sees through all that marketing fluff. It's very context aware. It wants to know that the chatter on the ground is truthful and being leveraged. So it wants that kind of specificity. And then you've got Gemini, which is the Google product, and it very much revolves around the more traditional accepted Google way of being found, EEAT. It wants you to prioritize .gov and .edu level kind of trust sources. So very much integrated with that Google authority signal. Peer-reviewed, institutional, official sources carry the most weight. And interestingly, it doesn't say it downweights, but it doesn't use reviews and social buzz as much as Claude, for example, or some of the others. It looks for authority more than human feedback. And then you've got Grok, which is kind of like this, crazy uncle, but more like a news desk or live feed. It's all about speed and about freshness and kind of this having this real time social pulse of what's going on. Word on the street is there is a freshness kind of indicator. Apparently, content that's older than 10 days gets downweighted. There's some skepticism about that, but I can believe it if the incentive is to get people to be active on Twitter. So yeah, taking all that into account starts giving you a bit of a view of who these people are, and we can put personalities on them.
Yeah, love that. I mean, listen, so we're a Google space. My whole life has been around Google for so long, so I'm a big fan of Gemini, back to the OG Bard days, and I am 100% influenced by what Gemini does. She's my coach, my advisor, my PA, my researcher, all these multiple personalities, one individual, technically individual, and based on what I need, at the time. I mean, she even told me last week to not eat Nando's, and I listened.
Why? What do you mean it told you not to eat Nando's, and why would you? under what circumstances would you listen to her to do that?
Yeah. Okay. So the context, because this is all context, right? It wasn't like, should I eat Nando's, and it just said no. Short story is, I'm training for a race, which at the time now today is actually happening tomorrow. But last week I said I had a choice between Boathouse Sushi and Nando's, and I actually really felt like livers and rice. And I thought livers and rice are really good, both quite healthy, iron in the livers, the rice is good. Short story is, as Jem and I said, well, normally livers are going to be cooked in a really spicy, creamy kinds of vibes. And if we're looking at the nutrition that we've been working on, because I've had a whole chat in there for the last, 6 months on injuries plus nutrition plus my training. I put my Strava data inside into one big long chat for context. Eventually she said, go for it if you want to, but if you really are trying to stick with your stuff, rather get your Nando's as a special treat when the race is done, but rather go for the sushi. And I listened. So yeah.
Okay, so cool. Nando's lost. Probably something with enough volume and research. The kind of thing that a restaurant or QSR brand would want to know is, are we positioned in the right place to be referred to for nutrition, athletic nutrition and sporting nutrition? And if they want to be, they need to potentially start putting the right content into the right places. Yeah. One of the things that I often say to our clients is, you can't market your way into this consensus, right? So these influencers, you can't send them goodie bags, you can't bribe them, you can't pay them the way you would others. So and you can't put out a whole bunch of marketing fluff and hope that they pick up on it. The LLMs are actually primed at seeing through all of that and trying to come up with the most unbiased, factual response that they can, because that's the value that they're bringing to the consumer. So there's a couple of ways, I guess, that they would go about that. And one is the technical route, get your site and your own domains into the perfect place. And that is almost like saying, we exist and we are valuable, and you should believe that we are somebody you would want to talk about. And then there's this content layer of, great, now we want to start putting that kind of content out there. How our food helps from a nutritional level for people who are training, for example, and the ways that content is put out and where it's put out and how it's consumed. That kind of creates this content layer that is almost saying, great, we exist, here are our facts, our side of the story, we believe that this is true, but the long-term way that these influencers decide that they will actually promote you is actually around the entity trust. And we talk a lot about this entity trust. Maybe we should have another recording on this at some point. But that's where the humans are saying, yes, this person does exist. What they've said is true. We believe it. We agree. We think this is a really healthy, space to, place to get your protein for your trip. And if that's being signaled out to the LLMs, and they say, oh, cool, Nando's says this, and then a whole bunch of people on Reddit, for example, go and agree, and they've tried it, it must be true. Sure. Because I'm sure a whole bunch of other QSRs are also saying the same thing, but we need some way to go and see that this is actually true.
Yeah. And as you say that, Grok trying to potentially prioritize recency as opposed to necessarily authority only. What is that balance, right? And do you prioritize recency with weather 100%? Do you prioritize recency with, and I can't even think of a very smart example at the moment, but with other things like, how do you then start differentiating that? Because potentially we can't just slap one big layer of how to prioritize and influence data and information for all kinds of topics, right? Because even the EU has postponed this AI Act, read in the news recently, because of a delay in technical standards. Because, personally, I think if you allocated a benchmark, how do you then build laws and prioritize rules around that benchmark when it keeps on getting raised?
Sure. Yeah, man. Look, I don't know. One of the, like I said, the recency, the topic you bring about recency, if I have to think about, there was a cool meme on Instagram or Reel or something about eggs and time travel, the time traveling nutritionist. I don't know if you remember that, where this nutritionist goes back to the 50s and says, don't eat the eggs. And then it comes back in the 70s, okay, eat the eggs, but only the egg whites. And then later on, it's 2020, 2026, and it's like, no, it's fine, eat the eggs. If somebody wasn't updating that story the whole time, the LLMs wouldn't know which one to believe. And so recency comes into the fact of ensuring that my fact is still the most appropriate fresh act. So that's one of the things that they need to keep in mind.
Fun times. So, Kelvin, in short, what's the main thing companies need to do in this wild time of trying to get their content to be prioritized within all of these different LLM personalities?
I think going back to the point of don't think of them all as a monolith. They are unique and they require their own tactics and tools. Understand what each of them need and want. Don't try and market your way into it. Start thinking about providing real, honest authenticity, foster real human love, brand love again and again and again. That's the long tail part of it. And just provide a really good service that will come out in the wash, right?
Yeah. I think we're probably going to have another conversation about this in a year's time, and it'll be different, right? And we'll have some rules and regulations, but that might be all completely changed because we're moving so fast. So, Kelvin, thank you again for your authority on the topic. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we'll chat soon. Thanks for listening.
Enjoy.
The unfair advantage.